Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I have two observations to make or remarks before I get into what I will consider an abridged version of what I was supposed to do. It's always difficult, act to follow Dr. Saad. And he has almost said it what I wanted to say. You see, that's always a good excuse, and you know that remark. But I have another reason to do that. I just came back, yesterday. I was away for 3 months. I had an eye surgery. So what I did is that I came back, with another two eyes, and sitting there and waiting for my healing process, I put it also 10 pounds, So I have a bit of a difficulty in synchronizing on the notes, I put it. So that's another reason why actually I should go on a more abridged fashion now that I have taken comfort on what Dr. Saad already has said it, and maybe that would have been some of the areas that I wanted to actually, mention. I think as my colleague, or my friend said it, I am not a consultant. I think I've been introduced earlier as a consultant. I happen to be someone who has a special interest, in the area of development. That's what I did with my PhD a long time ago. In 1975, I did development, economics at the University of Sussex Institute of Development. Since I took an early retirement from my work, and I always wanted to come back, home. So being in here, I like, actually any service that I can do it to actually provide. So my presence, or being a jack of all trades, in the different ministries, basically comes, from that sort of perspective. Having said, this, what I would like actually to do it, in this abridged, sort of what I called, version, is to go through what I consider as the subject matter, which is the private sector. I think here in Somaliland, can you consider, Somaliland without the private sector? I think there will be no Somaliland substantially without the private sector. They helped us in the hard days, and I think, there is a challenge for us, public and private, to grow together, to move forward in the next actually level, which is we are going to be substantially challenged if we have to actually work towards the realization of actually a much more prosperous, society. Now, there is this that leaves us with this sort of relationship between, or virtuous sort of a circle between the public sector or the government and the private sector. The government enables, a more effective private sector, and that is actually the role, it has to play, and it has to grow into that. And the private sector enables, more effective government on the other side. You see. So what I would like to go through it, very quickly, is to mention that taking this, as a point of departure, that it's essential to have a better public governance and a greater public-private cooperation. I think, we need to really enhance actually the quality of the public-private dialogue so that, we can actually strive towards accomplishment of that sort of a common national sort of, goal. I think on the other hand, the government will be, in order to fulfill its part of the obligation, has to actually put it in place a conducive business environment and the appropriate institutional reform. I think, a lot of the things which is mentioned earlier and what we will be deliberating in the days, in the coming, 2 days, will actually sort of, you know, will cover, that. Now, I think, from the part of the private sector, we are actually fortunate to have a very innovating, entrepreneurial society. So, the development of that entrepreneurial culture and the increased role, they play in as part of the private sector will become, sort of essential, and this is something that we need to really, again, sort of ponder on and actually engage each other in these 2 days in trying to come up, with a much more tangible, more actually achievable goals, for the realization of that, during our deliberations. Now, having said that, we have the advantage of a dynamic private sector, that will increase, hopefully, and we expect to have an increased private investment. And from there, hopefully, and that's what we are striving to have an increased productivity, which will enable us, to have a type of an economy that will actually sort of enable us to achieve what we have actually already put it up in our Vision 2030, and also we intend, to do it, within or incorporated within the current NDB2, which is under, preparation. Now, this, economic, growth will give us, not only the growth, but actually enable us to get it, hopefully, in this joint, partnership with the creation of the jobs, which is very critical for our youth, and our, security also, and will enable us to obtain the necessary wealth formation. And hopefully, with the wealth, formation, the government actually revenues, will increase. Its capability to play its part, will be enhanced, and actually in the government, we will that it will be reflected, in the it's already in the pillars, of the current vision, but also in the planet national planning development too. It will enable, or it will oblige it, or will require the government, from the revenues, they will be collecting to avail us the public investment in the physical and social infrastructure which is needed to enable us to move it, forward. So you see, we're moving it all, the inter sort of connectivity of this. I think another important thing, which is we have a serious, constraint, and you know it, much better than me, or everybody knows, is that, we have, the deficiency in human capital development, and which actually uh, um, constrains our economic inclusion. And therefore, I think we are looking it forward in a joint effort to have, higher education uh, 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 and in the context also of a much more dynamic civil, civic, sort of, engagement. If we're going to do this sort of this relationship, I think what we need is to start to actually focus on shifting from looking things in terms of a short term and look at more in terms of a long term perspective. That's why whatever private sector endeavor, development of private sector endeavors, we want to develop, has to be actually uh, uh, um, uh, um, uh, embedded, in the vision, or synchronized with the vision in the National Development Plan. Now, in order to move, forward on this, there are certain critical areas which, I mean, we all know it. I think, everybody knows, who now, reads it, on private sector development. And there is, basic sort of, blockage, or constraints. And we have, in terms of our own country specificity, we have our own, constraints, which is peculiar, actually, substantially for us, which we need actually to seriously consider it in order to move it, forward. And that will actually, enhance, the enabling environment which we need. These sort of, constraints, are actually, our binding constraints are the limited access to infrastructure, low and variable level of foreign investment because of our special circumstances. Hopefully that we will actually have some emerging opportunities that will enable us to actually sort of compensate, for that. The low level of entrepreneurship, is also partly, a binding constraint. Access and cost of finance is another actually serious and constraint. Actually, anyone you talk to, the first thing they will mention to you, which is actually a reality, is access and cost of finance. Lack of skills, I mentioned earlier, is actually predominant, and the regulatory environment is another thing which actually contains a lot of activities to be done a lot, on this. Now we have to actually work on unblocking these, constraints, and in order to move it forward. As we tackle some these, I think there's a few things, which is very, we have to do it in terms of Somaliland context. Our private sector structure is very important for us because whatever we are doing it's guided on the reality on the ground. We are very successful, and we are very proud of our actually firms, which is now large but small, in number, which are actually sort of, done, very, sort of accomplished a lot, But what is very critical for us is, the SMEs, the small, medium enterprise. I think small business is not small business. I consider for us a small business as actually a big business. Now this is an area that we need to really focus and help them to move it, along. They are going to be the future of our, sort of big, firms, and they will actually, in terms of employment, in terms of actually, various economic activities, they are the backbone of our community and what we are doing it. So I think, we need to give it a special attention to the SME. I mentioned a bit earlier, but I think we need to really focus, on public-private partnership as well as public-private dialogue. We need to take this qualitatively. We know it, we have been talking about it. Samples are there. And we need to have a much more robust sort of actual policies and actually, forum for public-private dialogue. And things, that I have been mentioning, earlier in terms of that virtual sort of, circle, it becomes, very essential, as an enabler to have, sort of, in that. I think, what is important is to help, the private sector. Capacity needs, and we need to develop and enhance it. And I think we are substantially lacking in terms of supporting it and having it in a much more, again, sort of active and vibrant business associations and chambers of commerce. We have to actually give it a special attention in supporting, this, and I think they have to also, see themselves, that they are pivotal in actually trying to move it forward, along, the future, development. Now, there is actually what is really required also is building an effective reform pipeline. We must have, the PFM reforms, overhauling of our financial sector and capacitation of regulatory bodies, such as the Somaliland Central Bank, streamlining the regulatory processes, business reforms and regulations, business climate and commercial law, legal reforms, anti-corruption laws, and we have to be compliant with international laws and protocols. See, we are not, we will not be operating in isolation. We are actually very ambitious to break out from the isolation which we are in, and we have to prepare themselves, in putting it in place, an active and effective reform pipeline that will enhance our readiness to move it forward, to have it something which is more viable here, and that will enable us also to engage, the external community. There is, for example, at the moment there's an opportunity, there's an emerging opportunity that has also its own related challenges. I have in mind, the recently concluded, arrangement, with the develop, DP, DP World, and the Berbera corridor. These are actually going to be a change, actually, game, changers. It's going to be very substantial. It will help us, I believe it, in actually breaking out, from the type of constraints and isolation which we were in. So this is going to actually test us, and it's going to be a catalytic, and will give us, a lot of momentum to move forward, but at the same time it will challenge and test us. So if we want to take advantage of this, if we want to take, advantage of our country's location and the increasing opportunities, to serve, the markets, in the region, still we have to actually challenge ourselves, and we have to actually improve our readiness, to meet, that. So our government's, commitment to reform, and the citizens, sort of preparedness becomes, very, very, very essential. It's a very simple thing, I mean, my understanding is that when someone like, the Dubai World wants to invest, 400 million, in Somaliland, where are they going to get the money? They're not going to draw it, from his, actually account. They're going to go into the market and raise it. Now, this gives us a huge, opportunity to be introduced, to the world. It's unbelievable, this is. Now, it will be a testimony. We used to have what we called, Africa's, best kept, secret. I think that secret, will, if we are smart, will blossom. It will open up. But we should have the necessary readiness to grasp that sort of opportunity. So therefore, we are being challenged to those types of reforms. The pipeline that actually I mentioned becomes, extremely essential. Now, I have a remark to make it, in terms of our donors, and our collaboration arrangement. I think, there's a lot of good work in the area of the private sector which is taking place. And I think, we have to be very grateful to the various sort of initiatives which is, underway. But I think there is the main observation I have is that I think we have to avoid the risk of this being sort of supply-driven. We get to actually taking the initiative, to actually owning these, sort of, reforms and these, programs. This has to be actually prioritized and sequenced. It should be led by us. We should have a much more clearer, and readiness for a much more uh, um, collaboration with our partners. I think they are doing their part, but I think we have to actually rise to the occasion. Not only rise it, but we should actually take the leadership that we solidify this program. It's very critical that actually we shouldn't be having it sort of a mix, diverse sort of programs to support private sector development. This has to be consolidated into a comprehensive public, I'm sorry, private sector development strategy, which should actually then take us forward. I think the essential thing is that should set us the stage. I think what we need in order to move it forward is actually establishment of that private sector strategy development. Uh, uh, and I think the main focus for driving the development of such strategy will be the infrastructure for growth, investment in the promotion, entrepreneurship development, access to finance and the credit expansion, skills and innovation, and, and better regulation. So I think what is required of us is to is to is to is to have in place that viable um, strategy, and then all things should be hang around, or actually should be part of that comprehensive thing. That way, the relationship we will be having with our development partners will actually bear a much more meaningful, actually, fruit instead of actually having it lacking the synergy and having a lot of diversified and sometimes competing programs, that actually, in all good intentions, that are actually putting forward. I take this opportunity to recognize, the good contribution that our sponsors of this, forum has taken, and the contribution, and the good example they set it in terms of, a model for a multi-stakeholder, sort of collaborative sort of effort. And I thank them very much personally, and I'm sure you'll allow that I do it also on your behalf. Uh, I think, with these, sort of few remarks, uh, I didn't meant, and I'm not actually didn't intend to do a keynote, speaker sort of elaborate presentation, but I thought that this abridged version would set up, the stage on actually, the elaborate sort of agenda in front of us. And I hope that some of those things that, I have outlined will be revisiting it, in the coming, 2 days, and come out, with a much more conclusive, practical, and actually appropriate sort of, agenda, for, the well-being of everybody. With this, I thank you very much.